And then at some point, I decided I'm moving back to Israel, and Eris was a long-time member and a good friend, and was kind enough to take over the meetup, who I think has doubled since I left, and is now also running the CTJS conferences. So he's doing it so much better than I ever did. So kudos, and great to see you, everyone.
Actually, the last 2 days we hit the 5,000 members in our meetup in London. It's quite good. I'm just going to quickly share the slides for the people watching online. I don't run the meetup by myself. There is also Milos. You want to come up? Say a word. And we have Marco, and there are the 2 other ladies that they're not here today. That they help with a meetup, because after a while I started doing conferences and it became a bit more busier. I didn't have the time to do it. It happens that I work in Foolproof, and it was easy to do it here today. So JS Monthly, the guys from the folks, I shouldn't say guys, although we have a guy here. The people that help me, they created a LinkedIn profile. So if you want to join us, find out about future events, you can do that now. I'm waiting. So, and this is like a thank you, because I work here and they allow me to do conferences. It's a nice environment, really nice people. It's like a design agency, part of a bigger group that is in India called Zensar, and we do a lot of projects. The engineering team is a bit small, but I'm part of the engineering team. But yeah, the other sponsor that they offer the pizzas, the drinks, it's Vonuts. Vonuts is like a family to me, I have to say, because they have been helping me in my conference for a number of years now. They used to be in Exmo, right? I still have some t-shirts. I got some t-shirts from storage, and I was finding my Exmo t-shirts. And they supported CTJS annually this year, so I was able to hit another record, 8 conferences in 1 year around the world. They came to a lot of places with us. So yeah, you have to thank these 2 people, Paul and Lucinda, for that, and for today's pizza. They also have a competition. So if you want to win, what is a Lego Nano, how do you say that? Gauntlet? You have to scan this code. Yeah, sorry, yeah. So yeah, scan this. You have the whole night to do that. So don't miss it. They do have more and more great stuff. So Paul, I think, is going to talk a bit about Vonuts later. So yeah, we're just going to go forward to that. All the sessions that we run at JS Monthly, they get recorded in a Pusher library of videos. So if you want to go back in time, if you want to follow us, like today's videos, they're going to be all in that channel, so you can go back and re-watch them. Yeah, and then I just want to make like a small advert about the next conference in London. So we have some amazing speakers, one of which is here, Rachel. And we have some also other amazing speakers like Jason, Sarah, Attila, a lot of good names. Some of them I brought them from Berlin. I had to cut them short at the end, so I need to give them a second chance to do a bit more of nice talking. So yeah, there is a number of nice workshops. So if your companies have training budgets, you want to learn how to build AI applications for the web, you can. These are it's like 3 or 4 hours, and it's for £99. We are selling in a community kind of fair pricing. We're not like to sell quite expensive. Pretty soon we're gonna have sponsors, And like Vonas have been doing a lot of stuff like web components and other amazing things. So there's going to be more free events from our sponsors. That's going to be added later on. I have a special 10% on our early birds for the people that are here. So if you want to get that, it's only available for you only, that you came here. And yeah, this is the event today. We have 3 amazing speakers, Vladi, Rachel, and Paul. And we're going to be going in half an hour talks. And in between, we're going to have a break-in sessions. You can have a drink, some pizza, try to finish everything. And yeah, and then we can go to a pub. All good? Okay, so I'm plugging off, and you're going to hear from Vladi now. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think we're ready. Yes? All good? Well, hello everyone. My name is Vladi. I'm super excited to be talking about this because this is a topic that I have researched a lot, and hopefully I get some of you excited about it as well. And it's going to be a very lightweight talk. So yeah, I hope you enjoy. What I want to talk about is why and how some of the most popular applications like Figma and Notion have harnessed the power of real-time collaboration. And I'm not, okay, sorry, this one. It wasn't all good, actually. Okay, so now you can hear me. And you can also hear a little bit of an echo, but that's all right. No? Okay. Okay, so Figma and Notion, how did they implement real-time collaborative features on their end, and also how you can implement collaborative features on your own JS apps in a very quick and lean OSS-focused tech stack. Before I get started, just to be sure we're all on the same page, I wanted to share some of the expectations that I have when I talk about modern applications. I'm sure you have some of the same expectations as well. But when I think of the formula for a modern application, I expect to see certain ingredients, if you will, right? So, for example, it needs to be instantly available anywhere in the world, has to be accessible to a web browser or a mobile device. It has to be optimized for user experience. Whatever you want to do, you need to do it effortlessly. But for those of us who work in distributed teams, because of geographic distribution, preferred working style, or because of the size of your organization, you may also have some other expectations. And these are some of my expectations, right? I expect to be able to share my work with my team. I expect to be able to receive feedback about my work from my team within the same app without having to switch to a different app. And I also expect to be able to collaborate on that project with my team. And what's surprising to me is that not all of modern applications meet these expectations, especially when it comes to collaboration. And especially knowing that the capabilities are out there. They have been an intrinsic part of industries like gaming for several years. Quick introduction about myself, so you know who's speaking. I'm the director of community for multiplayer, and my background is in community building and customer support in the tech space. I was fortunate enough to work for other user-centric companies like Prisma and MongoDB before. And I hope that I don't disappoint too many of you when I say that multiplayer is not an MMORPG. Massively multiplayer online role-playing game. It's also not a multiplayer enabler, so you can't use multiplayer to build these features that I'm talking about. Multiplayer is a SaaS platform for teams who work on large-scale complex distributed systems that have many components and dependencies, and we help those systems, well, those teams align within themselves and with other stakeholders on visualizing, designing, and managing that distributed system. So as you can imagine, real-time visual collaboration was so important to us. Well, besides inspiring our name, we spent a lot of time researching this and trying things out and, excuse me, also trying to implement different ways. And so today I'm gonna share our experience and some of the painful lessons that we learned along the way. And maybe I'm gonna inspire some of you to add these features to your own apps. Real-time collaboration is now table stakes, not just because of the benefits to the user experience, but definitely because of that. If you think back of how we used to collaborate, and this was only just a few years back, we used to work on the same project file, but independently in silos. And if you remember, what happened is that we would make changes to the project files and then share them back and forth, and somebody would have the dubious pleasure of reconciling all of those changes in a single file, if at all possible, and then that file would have the best name. It would be final version 2, version 5, and that would be the file that would serve as source of truth. But just imagine actually working in a single shared environment, virtually side by side with everybody, with a common language and framework. Obviously, it's much easier to align and drive consensus. And it's not a coincidence that apps like Figma, Notion, and Miro have been so popular in the last couple of years. But what's interesting is that it's not just those type of companies. Businesses in other verticals that historically haven't thought of themselves as collaboration first have started to embrace this trend. And it's also acceptable to think about it because collaboration is a virality machine for businesses. Just think about it, the ability to invite and involve more stakeholders in your app, well, it means you have more users using your app, but also it means that you have higher retention and adoption rates, because when distributed teams can achieve more together with your app becomes an intrinsic part of how they work. So now that we talked a little bit about those things, let's just align what I mean about real-time collaboration, because there have been many attempts to coin a term for this trend, including multiplayer collaboration with a lowercase m, deep collaboration, and collaborative enterprise, but I'm sure there have been many other terms as well. So throughout this presentation, when I say real-time collaboration, I mean an app that has these 4 features, starting with real-time updates. Meaning, whenever a user does an action or a change, that needs to be propagated instantly to all other clients, or as instantly as the internet allows. Live playback, every user should be able to see what other users see on their end, right down to the cursors moving around their screen. Presence and status, an easy way to know who is online and ready to work. Data integrity. And when changes in data are coming from multiple places at once, being able to reconcile changes is very hard, and not losing data because of that is both a UX and a backend challenge, as we'll see. So how do we concretely go about implementing real-time collaborative features? Well, the very first approach that came to mind that we also tried was to extend an existing RESTful API to broadcast request and response messages to all connected clients using WebSockets. Right? And this works fine when both clients are working on the same thing and they agree, and for example, both of them want to submit the same version of a logo, right? It starts to become much harder when they have different ideas of how that logo should look like. Another example that I can give you is, imagine that you and a colleague are working on a document, however, the underlying software doesn't have good conflict resolution strategies. So as you work on the same line, you see your words all jumbled up or your letters all out of place. And that's because you're working on the same sentence at the same time, but the software can't reconcile those changes. And indeed, handling gracefully concurrent edits in a multi-user environment is very hard. And that's and because merging conflicts in a way that makes sense to the end user, it's not just about the sharing the changes in the data, but also about the context of the data and the status of the client making the change. So fortunately, we have two excellent technologies that kind of come to the rescue. One is operational transformations, and the other one is CRDTs, conflict-free replicated data types. When it comes to operational transformation, it's an algorithm for operational transformations to documents that have drifted apart to bring them back to the same state. And CRDTs, as the name suggests, it's diverse data types for handling changes and merging conflicts when clients work on the same data at the same time. And I do want to be clear that you can use WebSockets if you want to. We also use them in some situations, but it just takes much more time and effort. And also, you might get inspired by these traditional technologies and use a custom approach because it meets better your business requirements. For example, maybe you work for a startup, you value shipping quickly. OTs might be a little bit too complex, keeping in mind that this is a technology used for Google Docs. At the same time, you might get inspired by multiple diverse CRDTs that will reflect best the data structure of your document. And that, for example, is the approach that Figma ended up taking. Today, I'm going to be focusing on the technology that we use at Multiplayer and that I think offers the fastest and quickest way of implementing real-time collaborative features, which is CRDTs. And you have two approaches when it comes to CRDTs. You have operation state CRDTs, and just effectively what you're changing is the meaning of the C word in the acronym. So operation-based CRDTs, it's commutative replicated data types, and then you have state-based CRDTs, which is convergent replicated data types. Now, you don't necessarily need to go into that. You just need to know that they both have strong eventual consistency. Eventually, even if the two clients drift apart because of high latency or because of issues in the network, they're going to be brought back to the same final state. And ultimately, CRDTs are just a collection of simple algorithms. So for example, last writer wins set, positive negative counters, grow only counters. There are many others. In Multiplayer, we ended up choosing to implement an open source CRDT implementation to the YJS project. Now, YJS is interesting because it provides you with data structures like docs, arrays, and maps that can be easily mapped to regular JavaScript data types. And so when we ended up deciding to implement YJS in our app, we didn't have to radically refactor it. But there are other positive aspects to this project as well. For example, it has a large open source integrations library, for example, rich text code editors, whiteboarding tools, and code editors as well. It has supports for any data structure with the YJS shared types, painless client-like connect, network agnostic, awareness features out of the box. And if you're not familiar, we're going to go over the awareness features in a second, and obviously a large community as well. But when you're talking about CRDT implementations, YJS included, it's not just about data types. It's also about the system architecture that you choose to implement. For example, YJS does support peer-to-peer architecture. However, we ended up choosing to have a central peer, which is called the collaboration service. And that's because we had the requirement, for example, to provide a feature like snapshotting. And so the collaboration service for us serves as the peer who does all of the conflict resolution, but also as a single source of truth for the data. And so let's say from the example from before, my super ugly logos, let's say that they have two different ideas of how these logos should look like. Now that change is going to be propagated to the central peer, which uses the YJS library. The conflicts are going to be elegantly resolved, and everybody is going to see the same state in the end. I do want to mention that while this is the simplest solution to support, it does have a few drawbacks. First of all, as you can imagine, this is more CPU and memory intense because you do need to have a server-side resources for managing editing documents. Also, a little bit more complex to scale because you need to be able to deploy the central peer close to the client. However, overall, it's still simpler than other options, and you would end up needing some central services anyway for data management storage. So just as a quick recap, this is our current architecture in multiplayer. And it's also, and I visualized it using our platform, so it's a little bit meta. But as you can see, we ended up implementing Vue.js using that central period called collaboration service, and which has three main functionalities. The first one is the collaboration service serves the latest version of a document to any new connected client, and it shares any edits to that document to all connected clients, and finally also saves a snapshot of the document. We keep latency low by deploying it close to the clients. And then underneath that, you can also see that we have a directory service cluster. And that we use it to manage the collaboration sessions, because it allows us to, well, deploy the session, but also keep track of all of the active sessions and then move the session transparently if we need to. Okay, so we talked about implementation in general, but let's look at the specific features that we ended up implementing. And just a quick note, there are many real-time collaborative features. We implemented only those that made sense for us. And also we used Vue.js only when it made sense in terms of resolving conflicts from multiple users making changes to that at the same time, or for temporary things belonging to a document, such as user information. We didn't implement it for everything. And in fact, now that we are looking at the first category of real-time collaborative features, which is awareness features, which includes, for example, the features of tracking and communicating the online status of users. Well, you have the avatar stack here, and we use WebSockets for that. We have that central peer, Vue.js is network agnostic, and also we need to pull information from multiple documents at the project level, so that was easiest. However, when it comes, for example, to live cursors or the user in-app location, we did end up using Vue.js for that. Very simple to implement, and also the how you go about implementing the logic was fairly simple for both features. Another feature is typing indicator, but we didn't implement that one yet. A second category would be state synchronization. So anytime a user makes an action or a change, it needs to be propagated accurately and with low latency to everybody else. And so you have features like live updates, co-editing, undo and redo. And for those, the easiest way to show you how we use Vue.js is to think back of that system architecture that we used, that I showed you before. And so think about, having two users working on that at the same time. One of them, for whatever reason, has decided to move the one component, the collaboration service, somewhere else in the system architecture. And another one at the same time has decided to rename that component for whatever reason. Well, both of them are working on it. And with Vue.js, we can reconcile these changes happening at the same time to a same final state that's going to be shown to the users. And then the final, if I'm going too fast, just let me know, by the way. The final category is pub/sub messaging, right? So sending the right message to the right client in real time. And if you remember, I said we use Vue.js only when it makes sense to resolve conflicts and for temporary things. However, you don't need concurrent editing for commenting. It's only one owner for each comment, and it's not temporary. And so we ended up using REST API call and WebSocket for that one. Cool. So what we learned, the best part, this was a lot of trial and error, but while Vue.js was surprisingly easy, there were some challenges. The first one, arrays are supported in Vue.js. However, order of element is not maintained without a little work. And in particular, we learned that, well, the one approach would be to use the JavaScript number type and then add an integer for order. But what happens is that as soon as you insert an element, then you need to change the order of every single one of the elements that follows it. And so the easiest solution for us there was actually to use fractional indexing, which is what Figma uses as well. So what happens is that when you insert an order, you don't have to change the order of every single element that follows it. And so effectively, what we recommend is not to use the built-in number type, floating point number, because it doesn't give you a lot of precision. There is only a limited amount of numbers after the decimal point, right? what we recommend instead using a library that handles arbitrary precision decimal numbers. You can display this as a string, and you have diverse algorithms to have more precision. Another learning, which I actually alluded to, is that you do have some architecture options, but while YJS supports peer-to-peer, that may not fit your business requirements. We did have a requirement to be able to do snapshots, to be able to also have data in specific geographic locations for security purposes, think GDPR. And so that's why we need to have the central peer. But obviously, if you have a requirement to access your app offline, peer-to-peer would work best. So you can deploy a copy of your data in each client. And it's supported by YJS. Another learning is to be very specific when it comes to the scope of collaboration. We needed to be selective about which real-time collaborative users we use and where, because, well, they may be unnecessary, but worse, they could be confusing. For example, just to give you context, in multiplayer, you can have branches, chain sets, and views of the platform architecture and APIs. So where do you show the awareness features? Do you show them when everybody is viewing the same system architecture, or do you show them only when they're viewing a specific branch? And so what we ended up doing was to select being very contextual. We show the awareness features, which, just as a reminder, are the avatar stack, the cursors, only when people are viewing the same document on the same branch at the same time. And so you might have many people working on the same platform architecture, but you're going to see only the people working on your specific branch. And the last learning is that while YJS can do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, it can't do everything. For example, it doesn't support the transfer of data across document. So if you have to share some information from one document to another. Another example here is that we have components that have many dependencies, and because a component can be shown in different places on our app, it can be in the platform architecture, it can be in the component list, component details, and YJS can't do that. So how do we go about it? Well, we had to wire up dependencies across diverse data structures and then listen to the changes in the YJS document, so that then when you make a change to a component, that is automatically propagated to all of these other documents referenced in it without needing to refresh. And so that's all to say that you may also have some UX requirements that YJS is not going to support. So just as a quick recap, why should you be adding real-time collaborative features? Better user experience, quicker time to fun. Your users can align and communicate effortlessly, shorter production cycles, quicker time to market. When your users can align on the expectations, the requirements, the responsibilities, the roadmap, there is less miscommunication and backtracking, and so they can work more productively. And also they are in the same shared space, so they don't waste as much time because there isn't as much context switching, which is not to say that real-time collaboration is the ultimate productivity booster. It's not, but it does help. And it's also an expected enhancer of the user experience. And of course, it does have increased business revenue, because if an entire team, if not an entire organization, uses your app, well, in that case, you have higher retention rates, which is always great. So final note, last two pieces of advice. Don't reinvent the wheel. There are some great technologies out there to help you implement these features. And while we use the YJS and build them in-house, there are actually some great SaaS technologies as well. Lightblocks is one of them. There are many others as well, by the way. And embrace collaboration from the start, if you can. Adding collaboration as an afterthought to an existing app or only to a part of an existing app is just much harder. And that's not to say that it's not possible. You can certainly introduce YJS in an existing system. But yeah, adding it from the start when you're designing your app really makes the entire user experience collaborative. So that was me. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, I'm happy to take any questions.
I was interested in particular when you said that it becomes difficult to scale it and to make it so that you can have something closer to the user. And I was wondering, what solution did you use, if you can disclose, of course, and what did you figure out it works? Say, for example, I want to work with a colleague of mine, he's based in Australia, so pretty far away. What would be the best approach for that? And if you notice also that peer-to-peer or centralized work better than the other in terms of scalability?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And the answer is that I don't think we have solved it fully yet, to be perfectly honest. We haven't launched our app yet. It's still in beta. So I think that's one of those things that we are still working out.
You're launching in one region then? Or?
We're going to launch first in the US and then, yeah, see how it goes from there.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
What is typical delay in your current architecture, which you choose for changes on one client and see it replicated on another client?
I mean, it's instantaneous. We haven't noticed any particular delay. And that's all thanks to YJS. But yeah, it's immediate. If you have two browser screens, one next to another, and you're working on them separately, you can see the cursors moving at the same time.
So it's good.
Any more questions? If not, I think that's it from Vladi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we are going to have a short, like 5 to 10 minutes to grab another slice of pizza and grab a drink, and after that we are going to have Rachel, who's going to be talking about react.dev documentation. Thank you.
How long did it take you to develop?
Switch this one off to make sure it doesn't go out on the. Thank you very much.
I think it's a bit of a rework on the team.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I think maybe it's because the had a think about it. It's not a very good mixer amplifier, so maybe if I try.
I mean, like, I didn't hear it when I was back there. I just heard it when I was here.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's worth trying to check.
I think I can maybe help you a little bit, but I think it's more to do with the speaker than anything else. One, two, one, two, one, two. Check, 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 check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Yeah. One, two, yeah. One, two, one. 2, 1, 2. One, two. How does that sound? It's quiet. I don't know if it's just like if you're back to right, how does it kind of can you hear that sort of steady level? Yeah, so one that goes really quiet is down, I think it's probably okay. I'll adjust the physical. So is this is check 1, 2.
So you can either do
are you happy to like that?
Yeah.
So this is the one. That's yeah, I would say trying to get on your results here. And then basically we want to. I'm recommending a bit of your code first. But you want to. And then I'd say that they'll be perfect on your.
That's what I want.
Fantastic. Because a number of people who
I learned the hard way. 20% in France without your own.
Should be a rule, actually, yes, yes. And then this one we have a separate video. So this is kind of a backup thing. So this one could just literally click like that. One else again. It's pretty good. Good spot. And then we'll just just a thing to bear in mind. The mic is switched off. I'll come back over to the started. Switch on. Yeah. All good.
All right, I think that we are ready to start the second talk. Big brother.
So basically, I won't be able to whisper things anymore. Everything I say can and will be used against me in a court of law now, huh?
All right, perfect. I'll leave you to it.
Hello, fabulous nerds. It's good to see you. Good to see you. And thank you so much for having me here with you tonight. It's a real pleasure. Hello there. I'm Rachel Nabors, formerly of React Core, formerly head of developer education at AWS Amplify, Microsoft Edge mascot, and unrequested web animations evangelist, but not necessarily in that order. Now I am Director of Developer Education at Clerk. How many people in the audience have heard of Clerk? I'm going to make you raise your hands. Get your little paw in the air if you've heard of Clerk. And have you used Clerk? No paw in the air. Okay, that's okay. That's all right.
We need to share your screen for the.
Oh, dang it. Hang on a minute, folks. I'm being very unkind to our online viewers. Where? Oh,
I should say that
they can't see.
I used to work for Clerk, and I was in the Elf team. And there's great software down the way they build the software. So you should try it. There's some really cool people developing the foundations of Clerk.
It says I'm backstage. You got to let me up front stage. Now we're sharing the screen. We're going to do it. It's going to be awesome. There we go. Oh, apparently I'm on here twice. Forgive me for this. But what matters is that people get to see.
I can see that.
Can they see?
Yeah, everyone.
All right, sweet.
Give a big clap.
All right. So where was I in this long monologue? Okay. I am now heading up developer education at Clerk. I love teaching. All you need to know about Clerk is we handle authentication, so you don't have to. A lovely set of React components you can drop into your app. It's lovely. But I'm not here to talk to you about Clerk. I'm here to talk to you about the new react.dev. But back in 2018, I wasn't actually into React. I was more into Vue. Vue had a great animation components built right into it, and I was a web animations fiend. I also felt like Vue was easier to learn, and I saw more people like myself getting into Vue and other things like Ember. The communities felt warmer and cozier, and the documentation was easy to read, and it was pretty easy to pick up. But as I was looking for a new role, I realized that all the six-figure salaries wanted React. Forgive me. You can tell I got into the Peroni. I have had so much pizza. I am drowsy with pizza. Now, anyway, most six-figure salaries did require React. And I was like, but if the React community is not attracting people like me, then there's going to be a generational wealth gap between, if you bank on Vue, maybe you can get a great five-figure salary, but you're never going to change the cultural makeup of a site like Facebook or work for, like Amazon. To do that, you're going to need to learn React. So how can I get more people to learn React, have these great jobs, change the world, and make it more a place I want to see? I'm still learning the buttons. Even for experienced folk, React was tough. I heard a lot that even from computer science degreed majors, that they would struggle with grokking the basics of React, especially the more functional side of it. You had to plow through a lot and focus, and a very certain kind of person could succeed with React. And those weren't necessarily the people that I was working with every day. And I thought to myself, well, how can I make React as easy to learn as Vue and make that community more a place that I would want to live in? I figured there was no easier way to do this than joining the React team itself. So in 2019, I came to London and I joined the React team at Meta as a developer advocate / docs engineer. Now I should warn you, if you ever join a large FANG company, don't take the hybrid roles because they are a lie. Eventually, someone comes and says, well, you have to pick one of these so we can evaluate you against your peers. And you're going to be like, oh boy. So just saying, pick one and go with it. I continued down the line of docs engineer when I had to pick a path because I felt that the documentation was the best way to make the change I wanted to see happen in the world happen. To democratize React education and pull the lever that would enable millions of developers to teach each other, learn from the core team for free, and not have to cough up like $600 for a course. Impact. So this is how I spent the pandemic, building this site and its content with the React team and a couple of friends from the React community. I'm curious, now I'm going to make you raise your hands again. How many of you visit react.dev on a weekly basis? Oh, how many of you learned React from this site? Woohoo, welcome to the community. And how many of you used to use the old react.js.org? Okay, how many of you liked the old react.js.org? You like pain, I understand. It's okay, no shame here. I'm not repeating that. I will get in trouble. But before they would let me near React, I first had to prove myself on React Native. React Native in those days was still in a GitHub repo, and to get to their documentation, you went to github.io/Facebook/ React it kept going, but it really didn't feel like a proper open source project. It did feel like well, it felt very scrappy. That's what we call it. I had the task of spinning that straw into gold and improving React Native's documentation because the team was investing in an overhaul. So what did I do? Well, believe it or not, React Native is not just React. React Native is something that mobile developers use because they have to usually, because they joined a project and somebody said, we're going to use React Native because it's going to save us so much money on engineers. And then they get there and they're like, oh boy, okay, JavaScript, wow. And so they go to React Native documentation, and React Native's documentation would say, so, you know, React Native is like React, but for native platforms. And of course, the iOS engineer or the Android engineer would be like, oh my God, are you talking down to me? So my job was to figure out what these engineers from a completely different segment of the UI world, we're all UI engineers, we're all UI. Whether you're on the web or you're on the mobile, you're a UI engineer. We're all in this together. We deal with the complaints of making things work across 100 devices and making them look pretty. So what did these people want? I talked with about 10 different people. I usually do these in batches of 10, talked with 10 different people from the community, and I asked them about what was important to them and how they were using React Native and how they were learning it. I learned a couple of things. For instance, they needed more refresher material on React. And after people would read that, it's like React for native platforms, they'd go to the React docs. And the React docs would be like, well, you know a lot about JavaScript, don't you? And then they'd go to MDN and they'd have to learn JavaScript. And so 6 months later, they're like, okay, now I can contribute to the code base. That wasn't the best. So we needed more refresher material on React. So that was step one. Here's the basics you need to know about React. Moving along, please, sir. Needed more visual content. When they said visual content, they usually meant, can we just have an idea of what these components are supposed to look like? Because I don't trust that this code here is going to lead to that code there. And I don't feel like spinning up my IDE to find out, because that takes like 20 minutes. And honestly, I don't blame them. More in-depth content on specialized topics like security and testing, which are very different for people working with React Native than they are for people just working with React or just working on the platform of choice. And of course, up-to-date component and API documentation. Believe it or not, those used to be built from React Native's core, but the team had just moved them out into a flat file system in DocuSource. However, savvy React Native developers knew that the core team still left the best code comments in React Native's core files and would go there when they needed to learn something because the docs were often inaccurate or out of date. So there needed to be something to bridge releases and documentation. And of course, interactive code. They didn't just want to see pictures of the components. They wanted to be able to debug problems that they were having right there in the browser. I also ran some surveys after I got an idea of some questions I wanted to ask the community at large. Rather than going with my gut, I created a couple of surveys and I ran them. I learned some surprising things, like 41% of React Native developers came from a mobile background. That's a sad 10%. This is their first foray into programming, period. Sorry, guys, but that's okay. We welcome everyone here. Let it not be said that JavaScript isn't approachable by everyone. So one of the things that we did was we built in literal context switchers to speak the learner's personal experience. If you're a web developer, this metaphor is going to work better for you than the Android developer's metaphor. And we added that React refresher I told you about. Additionally, with these interactive sandboxes, courtesy of our friends at Expo, they created these little sandboxes, they call them snacks, and they run on a little server farm of real devices out there. This really helped with debugging. And once again, because the docs weren't built from source, they had to be updated by hand. So I ran a little docathon with the community where we updated all of the API docs and the component examples so that they reflected the source code. A nice push before the pandemic hit. And brought in experts such as Kadi Kremen, who is a local favorite, one of my personal heroes in the space. She wrote the docs on security and added some colorful illustrations, some by me, some by other people, which turned out to be quite popular. And got this shiny URL. No more of this github.io shame. This is the URL that set the pattern for react.dev and who knows, maybe relay.dev. But point is, react-native.dev launched on July 23rd, 2020. The whole effort took about 6 months, and it resulted in increasing the overall sentiment towards React Native's documentation by 70%. This is measured by thumbs up, thumbs down on every page. So between when it started, when it ended, there was a lift of 70% satisfaction. Nice. Well done. That seemed pretty good. Now will you let me work on the React project? Yes, now I could work on React. So I left an excellent steward in charge of the React Native documentation and moved on to work on React. Now here, the React docs have a huge responsibility. Something like 86% of React developers responding to my many community surveys learned with the old site, reactjs.org. I don't think they just learned from reactjs.org, but that lets you know how many of them are using it in their journey to go from 0 to hopefully a gainfully employed six-figure salary earning React developer. Now, the effort itself kicked off May 27th, 2020, right in the beginning of the pandemic. This is a photograph from my Kurzgesagt gratitude journal. You can see I played StarCraft at work, and then I kicked off React Educational Materials Reboot, and I got to talk to some lovely documentation engineers who work at Meta a little bit later in the day. Hurrah! So like with React Native, I started by talking to the community and figuring out what they wanted. Because the one thing I learned from React Native is the core team might think it knows what the community wants, but they don't know what they want. You should always talk to actual users. The thing about engineers is I think you get so used to solving problems and peeking around corners, and you think, yeah, I see that problem coming 2 years from now. And sometimes you're not paying attention to the real world things that are changing right under your nose. And so if you just keep following your nose, you're going to look up one day and you're going to realize that you've been barking up the wrong tree the entire time. You've been speaking to the wrong audience. Somebody else had a better solution and everybody liked it more. So I cannot underscore how important it is to make contact with the people you're building for. Even if you're a core contributor, you want to keep in contact and challenge your assumptions. It feels good to feel right. This is why we tend to mess ourselves up so much in life, because if we assume we're going to fail, it feels good when we do fail because that means we're right. And the same thing goes for many other assumptions we make. But assumptions we make about our community are ways ways that we can definitely shoot ourselves in the foot. Anyway, that's a tangent unique to this particular rendition of this talk. So what did they say? Very similar to React Native, with the exception that React community was like, are we supposed to be learning classes? Because react.js.org is, I don't know if you remember this, hopefully you are all too young to remember when react.js.org just basically taught people how to do everything using classes. And hooks had been released, but to find out about hooks, you had to go to this menu item, and you had to go down here, and then you'd have to read about the hooks in 3 different places to use them. That was very frustrating. I watched people navigate that over and over again. But the point was, even the core team knew we got to start teaching function components first. We need a hooks reference. Hooks references, by the way, not like regular API references with REST and endpoints. No, it's a function, and you just kind of have to draw a diagram of it and point to different parts of it and be like, this thing goes here. Very difficult. I did not find any references in the wild that I would point to. People keep asking me like, so what's your favorite doc site? I'm like, I have never once built a doc site based on somebody else's work. It's always a new battleground. It's always a new paradigm. I'm more inspired by how people are teaching React, and that's true. More about that in just a minute. And more visual content. Yeah, heard that one before. And of course, interactive code. I mean, at least that the React and the React Native communities have this much in common. You can see how the expectation of learning code is going up and up and up over time. It's not enough just to put code on the page. People want to mess around with it. So this project kicked off. It started as doodles in a sketchbook. This is a photo of that kickoff meeting and some of the sketches and the post-its that went into it. I assure you this happened in accordance with the NHS's lockdown policies. No laws were broken in the making of the React docs. But during this process, I made a new friend who we came to know as React Head. So doodling was a very important process of my journey with React. I would doodle a concept and then I'd turn around and be like, Dan, is this how state works? And Dan would be like, not quite. That is the way I remember Dan the best was not quite. And he had so much patience with me. I came up with some interesting ideas for visualizing state changes too, working with Brian. Kind of came up with this state notation, which looks a little bit like musical notation. That was fun. But after a while, I started doodling this guy who was inspired by IKEA, who came to be known as React Head. And here's some examples of the notes that I used to send to Dan. And I used to be an award-winning cartoonist, so you can see my comic skills coming back out. I often ended up describing React as a waiter in these kinds of metaphors. And some of them actually ended up in the docs in these inked forms, using these visual metaphors to explain what I was learning. We ended up with a spreadsheet of new content that was pretty big. The React team wasn't going to just revise the content of react.js.org. They wanted to teach people this new mental model of how to use React. And that was basically like writing a new book. And if you've ever written a book, raise your hand if you've written a book. There you go, you know what this is. If you've written a book, at least a technical book, or you're a good writer, you have laid out the chapters, the table of contents, the skeleton. It's pretty intense, but this is the best way to know what pages need to be delivered and who's on first, who's editing, who's writing. These docs went to beta December 8th, 2020. I delivered a little keynote about them at that conference, and React Head made their debut. Lovely. We also had a diagramming system, which you can see in the docs, where Maggie Appleton, another local favorite, contributed this diagramming system, making our chicken scratchings actually legible and much more useful to the world. One of my favorite bits is these international examples. So one of the challenges I've always had with examples in developer education materials is they tend to lean very heavily into American pop culture. American bro geek pop culture is a very niche, like Star Wars references. At best, maybe you get some cats in there. But the problem is, I see that as a form of imperialism. America is known for exporting its ideals and its pop culture around the world, and I don't really think that documentation is the correct place to be doing that. I mean, I'm not here to push America's colonization of the minds of the world. And also, I don't really like Star Wars. I think it could do better. It could definitely try harder. So what would we do? Sylvia Vargas, another local awesome. Sylvia Vargas actually came in, and Sylvia was still very much an open source contributor at this time, not the developer advocate leader that she's become today. And I'd laid out this lovely list of cool, internationally awesome topics that we could celebrate with the docs. Art, culinary cuisine, history, monuments and buildings and locations. And Sylvia turned all of our examples into ones that referenced and made use of these things, sort of celebrating the great things about humanity that are common to all of us. So it's also kind of like watching an episode of Bill Nye the Science Guy. You're learning about React, but you're also learning about the cultural heritage of the world, not about who shot first. So, and we added these lovely interactive sandboxes courtesy of our friends at Code Sandbox over in the Netherlands. These were the real game changer. I think yesterday, these docs actually won an award for Best API Reference and Best New Dev Portal at the Dev Portal Awards, which was pretty cool. I was kind of surprised, but I gotta say, it really came down to the quantity and the interactivity of these sandboxes, because people were really struggling to learn React. I mean, I remember trying to learn React over and over again, and I could never get past Webpack configuration. And who has started a job and the first thing they do is like, all right, it's day one. Your first low-hanging fruit is configure Webpack. No, they have it all configured. You're working in someone else's brownfield project, and they're going to say, oh, and by the way, we don't use those class names here. I'm going to have to ding you on your code review for that. Like, that's the problem you're going to run into, not setting up an environment. Oh my God. So we wanted to get people out of the muck of setting things up on their computer and into the joy. Hey, no, you do not fall asleep in the middle of this. And into the joy of the actual flow of using React syntax and playing with JSX and seeing that changing something here to update something there and all the gotchas that go in between. Most importantly, people learn by doing. Cramming doesn't work. On-the-job training is always better than a degree. When you get people who are joining the company for the first time, those who have actually contributed to some open source projects or built something are often ready to hit the ground running a lot faster than someone who only knows the theoretics behind something. And that's because, I'm gonna boil everything down from this book, that's because of spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is having to use the skill you've learned without being able to plan for it, like a pop quiz from your teacher. You have to recall it, you have to use it, you see the results of it over and over and over and over again until it's a muscle memory. The engineers I worked with at Facebook could look at a code editor and kind of glance at the shape of the code and guess what it was doing without reading it, because they had been in and out of the code so many times. How could we reproduce that? In a documentation site? Challenge accepted. So we invested in these editable examples, right? That let people interact with the code in 0 seconds, no environment to spin up, no dependencies to fight. And then what we did, we turned them into challenges. On the end of every page, there's a little challenge where people are encouraged to solve the error or to make the erratic behavior go away. It's got hints, it's got solutions, and you don't have to complete them to proceed to the next thing. We're not here to make you complete a course. You can dive in and out of the docs as much as you want. But the point is that that all of these examples were created by React experts like Dan Abramov. It's like being tutored by the React core team to learn how to think in React. And in testing, people kept wanting to do these and complete them. I couldn't make them stop. I'd be like, can we go to the next page? They're like, no, I've almost got the error log to go away. So how do we know if this is working? How do we know if we've actually made something that is teaching people React better, or if we've just created, just wasted a lot of Mark Zuckerberg's money? I have no qualms about that, but I did want to help people learn React and get those big jobs. Well, one thing I did was we had alpha testers. When the team wasn't quite ready to share the content, I was like, well, at least let me test to see if the content's working. And then I went out into the community. I gathered up people and I'd make them fill out a survey before they'd get access. And one of those questions was like, would you recommend react.js.org to your friends? And then after they'd had a week to play with the documentation, I'd send them another survey and be like, so would you recommend this documentation to your friends? And guess what? They were 3 times more likely to recommend the beta than they were to recommend the existing documentation. Sold. So March 16th, 2023, the docs were officially mission complete. There was a tutorial. The API references were complete. It was ready to go, and the React team was ready to take the banner off of react.js.org and replace it with react.dev. Don't worry, classes, folks. The old React documentation has moved to legacy.react.js.org. It will not be updated unless there is some calamitous event that requires it. But for the most part, you can expect to find this pressed flower of documentation and edifice to React's history for all eternity at this URL in case you are maintaining class components. It can happen. I'm not going to make you upgrade. So, yep, new site, new landing page. And the best part, 600 plus interactive examples. I'm pretty sure Dan did all of these himself. I know other people might have, but this just looks like the kind of numbers that Dan would be responsible for. I'm just saying. All right, so the illustrations and the interactive sandboxes that were trialed in React Native's documentation, they went on to change how we teach React, how we worked on react.dev. The React Native community had that impact on the overall direction that we take with these docs. Sweet. While it was in beta, 8 million learners had access, and I hope that the docs helped them in that period of time. We were in beta for a long time, so hopefully the docs were available. Now my quick question is for the organizers. My clock is wonked. How long have I been up here for? How much?
Less than 30 minutes, I think.
Well, I'm going to skip this next half. You all heard me going on. The next part was just going to be me saying things like, wow, how do you transfer all this knowledge? To which I can only say, check out these. If you're working on a doc site of your own, Docusaurus, if you have to build one from scratch, Docusaurus is a good choice, but you should also check out starlight.astro.build. The Astro team has something like 200 people contributing to its documentation site, and every advance they make, they bake into their Starlight documentation project. So I recommend you give it a look. It has a high velocity and a level of evolution. Believe it or not, React.js, the new site, was built using custom Next.js, but React Native site was built using Docusaurus. Use whatever works for you. If you've already got something in place, I highly recommend that you not burn it down and start from scratch. Usually your docs problems are content problems, not platform problems. Unless you can tell me a reason why investing a lot of time in migrating to a new platform definitely improves the learner's experience, don't bother. Spend your energy on writing. And to make sure that when you are writing documentation, make sure that your API references are solid. This is the foundation. All this stuff up here, people in your community will probably write blog posts and give YouTube videos about this. But if your API references are out of date or unreliable, nobody can build with what you made, and you will fail. So top priority, gate releases on these. Make sure they're up to date. And from there, you can build the rest of the healthy food pyramid of learning materials and resources. Whoosh. All right, boop, de boop. There's just so much. I have so much love to give documentation. Obviously, this was a 45-minute talk, but I think it's just y'all been so kind. If you're interested in learning how to write better docs, check out the Write the Docs community, writethedocs.org. They have some pretty strong opinions and some pretty good ideas, and it never hurts to go there. You can even find on their Slack, for instance, technical writers can help you out on a spot basis if you need it. And if you ever want to talk about teaching people to code or anything of the like, you can always reach out and say hi to me. I love teaching the world how to grasp really tough engineering problems. It is one of my joys in life. And I hope that these docs will continue to help you throughout your journey with Well, if not with JavaScript, then at least with React. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Great as always. Do you have any questions?
Hi, thank you for the great talk. I must say I work for a company that also offers a JavaScript library that's quite popular. And one of the challenges we have, we rebuilt our documentation website recently. And one of the challenges we had was how to address different types of personas, like different types of developers, experienced versus beginners.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not very obvious in React Dev. How do you address that? Beginners versus
Well, that's a great question. It's really hard to anticipate what level of knowledge people are going to have coming in. With react.dev, what we did was we added deep dives to the pages. These were blocks of code that would hide more technical in-depth content beneath a dropdown. There were a couple of findability issues with this, like if someone would land from a search engine, they might have to Command F and might not see where the content was hidden. But it really did, in user testing, it really helped people skim through the docs or dive deep as necessary. I think that this there are probably some cooler, trickier ways to solve this. But we found the best thing was to assume a very basic level of knowledge and then disclose to higher denominator, excuse me, then disclose to people who might have used progressive disclosure to allow people to unlock content they felt ready for in their own time. But I do think that ham-fisting, this is the beginner documentation and this is the, nobody learns that way anymore. We learn with Google and Stack Overflow. We dive in where we have to. So it's better to just put the finer details right there if people need them. Good question.
One more question.
Fantastic talk. Thank you. Okay, so in the part about react.native.dev, you have this thing and you're like, we fixed the docs, and there were like all these, it was like a GitHub issue where there's like so many issues fixed. And I wanted to understand, like, what was that about exactly? Like, were you just addressing community complaints about the APIs? Was it internal complaints about the, like, how did you know what was wrong?
All right. I don't think I was the person who closed all of those, but I can tell you.
No, the community was doing that, presumably. Ish. No, I don't know.
I moved on by then, man. But I can say that, as I understand it, when I was managing the repo back in the day, and also I think I know this guy. Jamin, is this you?
Jamin? Yeah.
Jamin.
That's me. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you looked familiar.
You know.
Yeah. What's this guy doing here? Anyway, so back when I used to be in charge of the React documentation repo, well, I wasn't in charge, but I was in there. A lot of the issues that were filed and pull requests that were filed were things that could have been addressed with the new documentation. Hooks first, education, where are dependencies and how they work with use reference, which to find that information was really hard in the previous docs, as the information was kind of scattered across 3 different sections, and you had to kind of read between the lines. So a lot of the questions and concerns that the community was logging as bugs and issues were actually addressed with better education. So it's the idea is if your docs are working well, it's a relief on support. And kids these days use GitHub as a support channel and Discord. And so by investing in the documentation, the React team was able to completely annihilate an entire backlog of support issues that they weren't able to get to. That was the idea.
Amazing. Okay, thanks. That makes a lot of sense. Appreciate it. Thanks, Rachel.
I think we have time for one last question. What?
Don't be shy.
I can ask one more. What do you think about AI and documentation? Can you generate a site like that using AI?
Man, I get that one a lot, and I can't tell you, but how much I'm excited for AI and documentation. I know a lot of tech writers are worried about it. I've heard this because there were a lot of layoffs in Seattle. And a lot of good tech writers that I knew got caught up in those layoffs. And they were all worried, like, oh my God, what if AI takes our jobs? And I was like, well, first off, when you have your job, what's your number one complaint? We never have enough resources. We can't keep up with the workload. I'm like, right. So here you've got essentially a junior that you can use to do a lot of the busy work, scaffold out blog posts. You can feed it your entire code base and get it to come up with good enough examples, etc. And then you're basically editing them and you're directing them. And wouldn't you be able to keep up with workloads if you just had that in your back pocket? It's not going to replace your job. It's just another tool set that you bring. You can show up and be like, hello, I can do the work of a team of 20 technical writers, and you're a little startup and you can't afford 20 technical writers, but I can do that work because I have a custom tool chain that only I use. So I think that actually, I think AI will make it easier to keep up with the technical writing challenge, but I also think it's going to introduce new learning modalities. I've really enjoyed, for instance, using ChatGPT in harmony with Copilot as I'm learning new things. It's like having a big sister. I can be like, what's this do? What's that do? And she's going to answer to the best of her ability, but I can probably get a better answer by talking to a college professor. But at least on a weekend, I got somebody answering my questions instead of, you know, like, oh gosh, I hope my boss won't mind if I call him up and be like, so what's the deal with Jot? Yeah, so I think it will only make it better. I think we'll be making better, more high quality things. I think some systems that are only scalable to big companies right now, like there's a DITA content system that's used by companies that have like user manuals or IBM, where they break down all of their knowledge into these little tiny pieces, and then they can just zip up new pieces of content as necessary and port them out and update them at scale. But that's just not possible for instance, a 200-person company, or even anything smaller than like a government or a very large organization. But now, with these tools, we might actually be able to do that at a small scale and be able to create better, higher quality content that ports that knowledge from core developers to other developers a lot faster. So hopeful.
All right, thank you. All right, so a couple of quick things to mention. We are not really going to have a break for the next talk, so if you want, you can go grab yourself a slice of pizza or if there's any more drinks. But before we do that, just to say a big thank you again to Bulletproof for hosting us. Also to mention, this is the last chance to use the Bonnet QR code to get the Nabors Lego set. So if you do want to get into the competition, please scan the QR code, fill in the details. That's it. And the last thing, this is going to be the last JSMONTHLY event of 2023. So I know it's too early, but I wish you happy holidays and you have a great time till the end of the last of the next of this year. And hopefully we're going to see you in January. Thank you very much. And yeah, we're going to get ready for the next talk. Thank you.
This goes in the top of it, so I'll pop it in. I'll spread it out on the other side. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. Sit at the end, sorry.
What's the best way for yourself to draw?
Yeah.
Like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
What's the best way to WhatsApp you?
You just, yeah, just come.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I might just recommend. But I mean, at least I've got some. Yeah.
My phone guy has. Let's continue the. The link. The browser. So I can.
I think that
It's a number here.
Slash. Then M6. Yep. Perfect. And just.
No swearing, yeah? Okay. Should be good, yeah? Test, 1, 2. Yeah, I think people can hear. 1, 2, 3, 4. No? I can hear myself, yeah. Usually that's a recipe for madness when you start hearing yourself. Yeah, I think it's good, yeah. So, oh, good. Perfect, yeah. No worries.
All right. Ready?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, I think that we're ready to start. Let me just see Alex. Ready? Round of applause for Paul, please.
Thank you. You're far too kind. Let me make sure that all my stuff is working, and then I can start presenting. How is everyone doing? Yeah. Sorry, I'm between you and going home, but we'll go into the pub rather, which will be more interesting. So this is my presentation. So first of all, thank you for coming tonight, and we're privileged to kind of be able to sponsor this and help you a bit with kind of organizing this this nice community. My name is Paul Ardeleanu. I'm a senior manager in developer relations at Vonage. It seems like a very small world because Rachel mentioned a person that used to work for us, and it feels like, hold on, I know this person. This is the first time I've seen Rachel speak, so it's a bit, it just feels really really strange and really like a nice small community. Right. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm gonna take you on a little journey, and it starts a bit untechnical, and then I'm gonna have some JavaScript code at the end. And funny enough, I don't normally write JavaScript, but without Copilot, I couldn't be able to write this sample app that I just did yesterday. And that kind of goes to show how important it is to learn things. And even with Copilot and the way it is trained, because all our documentation is public, it actually can write even Vonage code, Vonage-related code, which is amazing because we don't have to do anything. We just get that for free. So to give a bit of a spiel on kind of what Vonage is, we are a cloud communication API company. So we provide a robust developer-friendly platform where you can go and use APIs for anything to do with communication. So from sending an SMS to making a voice call to sending a WhatsApp message to doing video calls, we have a platform that allows you to build solutions around communications with customers, with custom solutions. We have all sorts of clients pretty much in every single industry. There's some really interesting cases, for example, the video platform where we have universities using it to do online teaching, and we have one-to-one with GPs, and kind of, as you can tell, we are positioned quite well at the beginning of the pandemic to actually take it. There's a bit of silver lining for us in the pandemic. And part of kind of the developer portal, we have a lot of documentation, and the technical writers are amazing at writing this documentation. If you work in developer relations and don't have technical writers, you should get some, because they need to exist, and they're dedicated and they know what they're doing. And yeah, they need help in a lot of places from the technical people, but generally speaking, if you don't have tech writers, you're missing a big trick. And part of my responsibility in the development team at Vonage is this tooling. So my team is responsible for making sure that all these different libraries for different languages, both from backend and native and a bit of front end and some web components and whatnot, are up to date and people can use them. Right. Before I get started, just a quick show of hands. How many have heard of the Kamara project? Good. That means you're a perfect audience, because I can tell you what it is. Okay, another show of hands. Who doesn't have a smartphone in their pocket? That's what I thought. There's a joke. You can tell who works in the telecom industry when they have more than one iPhone with them, and usually different networks trying different things. But every year they get more and more powerful. And these are kind of the top handsets for this year. You have iPhone 15 Pro and then the Pixel, whatever the latest model is. And kind of, we are at a bit of an inflection point at the moment in the telecom industry. We have a really high usage happening at the moment. This report is from 2022, and we are just under 5 billion active mobile users, and that's growing massively. And about 93% of the mobile usage is actually for a smartphone. And at the same time, we have this 5G revolution happening. And you can see the gap, actually the coverage gap is going massively down. And the 5G, it's not in this graph, that's the coverage, but, oh, it's the next one, sorry. You can see the 5G really taking off, and we're going to discuss what that means in a second. What's important to take from this is we are connected. We have basically the internet in our pockets. We have the human knowledge in our pockets. And it kind of begs to ask is, what do we do with those, and how we enable better experiences for our customers with that? On top of that, we kind of have new ways of emerging. I'm not sure how many of you know SpaceX, but Starlink, part of SpaceX. But they, as I think in August this year, they had about 5,000 different satellites in orbit, and they plan to add up to 12,000. They have a lifespan about 5 to 7 years, so you have to refresh them. But you can get connected to the internet directly. You don't need a wireless network. Anywho, so since you have one of those things in your pockets, you might be wondering, what's all this numbers? I'm not sure how many of you go to the website and look at the technical specs, and then you just kind of all these different things, and just kind of, what is that? And same thing is for Pixel Pro as well. It's kind of what your head might be spinning. So let me tell you what those are. So I'm going to take a bit of a trip down the memory lane. This is another example where ChatGPT or AI is amazing. All these images are generated by AI with a single prompt. In this case, it's actually done through the Bing platform. I can't remember what it's called, but it's part of the Bing search engine. They have a AI generator, similar to DALL-E, if you use the ChatGPT side. So I'm going to skip a bit to 18th century and go straight to the beginning of 19th century. And you probably recognize some of these if you have a physics background. You probably recognize some of these. I spent a lot of time kind of discussing this. I mean, you recognize the term hertz, right? There's a reason why frequency is measured in hertz. And a lot of you know about Marconi. He shared actually the Nobel Prize for physics for the electromagnetic waves, and he's the first one that actually started doing communications between ground and ships at sea using radios. So that was kind of the first era where things got started to be connected, and then we had the radio era in the 20s and 30s. I just love this image, and it's generated by AI, and that's absolutely amazing. I don't know, there's something in there that makes it absolutely amazing. Actually, high resolution looks even better. Right, so radio became a kind of a household item, right? So everyone had radios. They use low bandwidth, but they were prone to high interference, especially from weather. So later on in kind of the 40s, in the 40s and 50s, some scientists and engineers discovered microwave communication. So those were a bit more targeted. You can focus them and have a lower, a larger distribution, but they were kind of, still not there. And then it became the sort of networks. Sorry, I'm starting to relax a bit. I'm not sure why I'm starting to shake a bit, but it never happened to me actually in the last 5 years, but I'm starting to shake. Probably I should speak more often. Anyway, if you try to find your phone, your first phone in there, you won't be able to find it because, again, it's generated by AI. And there's some really interesting combinations in there, and I wish people would kind of create some of those. I think this looks amazing, and this one. I think that looks like a Nokia. Yeah, something like it. I think it has a special name as well. Anyway, so the mobile industry started in about 1970s, 1980s with a team at Motorola that put out a first mobile phone. These phones were analogic, so they weren't digital. They had a frequency about 800 megahertz, and they're prone to interference, right? I'm not sure if you remember, but this era, which was 2G, it was digital. But you remember your TV was starting to make weird sounds when you receive a phone call? Yeah, so it was part of that interference. So the 2G was actually digital, and it was the jump from analog to digital to make it better to do voice calls and to have SMS. And this is the first time actually when SMS started. And that's one of the most popular phones is the Nokia 3310. And at the time, if you're fancy, you have an 8310, which would have Bluetooth, and it was smaller. I'm not sure how many, it shows my age. But anyway, so that was the 2G era. And after that, kind of a couple of things happened, right? People start wanting to have data on their phones. So the 3G started as a way to enable data connections of the phone. But at the same time, something magical happened. So this is my phone pre-June 2017, and that's my phone after June 2007 or 17. So the iPhone and the smartphones came out. And it has kind of perfect storm for what was about to happen in the telecom industry. So you have all this data that started becoming available and the smartphones coming in. It was a perfect storm for big changes to happen. And this is kind of where the 4G started rolling out. So 4G was created for faster connectivity, right? We're talking about megabits per second speeds. We're talking about streaming happening. We're talking about a lot of things that enable apps on the phone. I think it was going up to 100 megabits per second, but it was the fourth kind of revolution of the telecom industry, and it allowed people to become connected. And this is kind of what we're experiencing at the moment is the 5G networks, right? So that's a joke there. So this is the current standard that's being rolled out. And the reason behind this is we want even faster speeds. We want lower latencies, and we want the ability to connect a huge amount of devices. And if you work in a kind of a Fortune 5000 probably business, you heard of a smart factory concept. This is kind of to enable that with IoT and other things, where every single bit of machinery, every single bit of component inside there is connected to the network. Data is being collected, analyzed, and it creates the whole ecosystem. So just to summarize it, these are kind of the different generations. So 1G, you have a 800 megahertz. Sorry, it was analog. On 2G, you have two separate frequencies. You had some data connection, and this is kind of the dial-up speeds back in the day. Also, at this point, they started standardizing the frequency, so that made it easier for you to jump between networks. So if you can swap, can go to a different network with the same number. Then the 3G happened for better speeds. We standardized the frequency. It made it a bit more stable and faster. The 4G happened as a result of that. Faster speeds, low latency, and being able to kind of bring a lot of devices to the network. And then finally have 5G, and those are a range of frequencies, and that's just a subset because there are country-specific ones, and you have instances where countries actually compete for frequencies and have interference. I'm not sure if any of you go to Eastern Europe, but you have countries where you can see networks from like 2 countries over because they have different frequencies, and yeah, it's a mess. But that kind of they try to standardize it, and one reason also for 5G to exist is very much low latency applications. So we're talking high definition streaming, we're talking online gaming, we're talking things where you need very, very low frequency. So I think Vladi was talking about how little kind of delay you need to have between operations. Having a 5G network kind of allows you to use Figma basically on mobile devices like you're next to each other, but you're countries apart. And that's the latency that people need in their apps. That kind of explains the numbers a bit. There's still a lot of more details behind it, but you can understand kind of what's GSM and all the others. So you might think, okay, so glad to hear this, but where is it going? So glad you asked. That's what I'm here. So let me introduce you to the Camara project. So this is the project I mentioned in the beginning. It's part of Linux Foundation, and it started in 2021 as a coalition between telco operators, vendors, and kind of hyperscalers. So it was officially launched in 2022 in February with 22 initial partners, and it has grown since then to about 250 organizations and hundreds, if not thousands, of contributors from this organization. So part of that, the main aim of the Camara project is to standardize across the telco industry by API operability. So it turns out that a lot of these networks have a lot of APIs inside them, but they're not exposed. There's a lot of goodness in the network that allows you to do a lot of incredible things. So I'm going to do a demo later of what I call silent off, and what we have as part of our verified product, where you can do 2FA without the code part. So you don't even need to have a code. And that is done directly with operators. And that's why having a standard like this becomes important, because you want to be able to do that across all the different operators. And I'm proud to say that we're part of it for our parent company, Ericsson. So you might have noticed that they got acquired by Ericsson. So Iris mentioned that we used to be called Nexmo. Now we call Vonage. Now, part of Ericsson since the end of last year. And we're very much part of it, and part of the structure that this project has inside. So because it became a funded project also, it has a lot of internal things that you expect the business to have. So it has a governing board, it has a steering committee, and it has the end user council that kind of determines where it goes as a community. And I'm glad to say that we have someone, actually a colleague of mine is part of a project. We're very much involved in setting the standards. So the Camara project is actually a GitHub org. You can see all the different things in there. As part of a working group, you can also look at the different proposals that you have. And inside, I'm not sure if you can see the back, but inside the API proposals, you can see all the different proposals for all the different APIs you have in the network. And we're talking tens of different types of APIs you can have. I'm going to give an example, a couple in a second. And once an API is debated and people decide to go ahead with it, it becomes its own project and it becomes its own structure. And they will get their own repository, and inside that repository, they will have a definition. How many of you are familiar with OpenAPI? So all of these use OpenAPI. They use 3.0, so they don't use 3.1 yet, but there's a move towards that. The difference is webhooks. And a lot of these use webhooks, but they have their own implementation. So once they graduate from a proposal, they go into this, and they look like this. So I could go into a demo, but I'm running a bit short on time. Each repository can be downloaded, and inside each one, you'll find a YAML file with the name of the proposal. So this particular API gives you the status for a device, if it's in roaming or not. And it's something that you can already do with other APIs, but this is from the network. Why is this useful? Because you might have instances where you don't want to allow access from certain countries because of DRMs or other things, or it might be that you have a policy inside your business where you don't want to allow people to go from other places. Lucinda, shall we do the prize? Yep. Okay, cool. I wasn't sure. Thank you. Cool. So one trick here, if you use OpenAPI, you can you install an OpenAPI. I think it's called Swagger, also extension in VS Code, and it's very easy to navigate, and it's really, really interesting to see all of these. Any questions so far? It's going to do a lot of hand waving, but I'm going to get to practical stuff in a second. Cool. So let's have a look at a real-world implementation of this. And this is something we have in Vonage working at the moment, and it's called silent authentication. And the way silent authentication works is, imagine that you build an app for a bank, and part of that you want to have a 2FA. And the usual standard you have at the moment is you send a PIN in an email. If you want to make it more secure, you can do it in SMS, or you can do it in WhatsApp these days. A lot of businesses move towards WhatsApp as a way to mitigate some of that risk. With silent authentication, you can avoid that part and actually make the user experience a bit more interesting. It turns out that although it's easy to do silent authentication on mobile devices, it's harder to do it on the browser. And the reason for that is, for the silent authentication to work, you need a direct connection between your app and the mobile operator. Right? So when you do a web call from your mobile phone directly for an operator, the operator can see who that phone is. It has all the connectivity between those and can determine what's happening. So with mobile devices, it's actually easy to do an API call through a certain network interface. There are APIs where you can say, this device is connected both to Wi-Fi and to wireless. I want to do this API call over wireless directly to the mobile operator. And that works fine. On the web, it's a bit more complicated because we don't have that. There is actually an API at the moment to determine the status, but there is no way to actually push a certain connection through wireless. So for that, you need to do a bit of signposting. But basically, this is kind of how it works. So this looks more complicated, and the trade-off is it makes our life a bit harder as developers, but it makes end user experience way better. And I'm going to have a quick demo in a second. So the way it works is you have some redirects happening here, and you have this redirect is basically, think of it as a return once you're authenticated, and it's kind of what's happening here. And this check URL is something that our platform generates, and it goes back to the mobile operator through there. And that's kind of how it works. So let me show you a quick demo of how it works. I have a recording there, but I want to do it live just for fun of it. Where's the screen? It's here. So this is a Express app. Nothing special about it. As I said, I'm not an expert in this, so it's me learning over the last 2-3 days how to do Express. I used to do it back in the day, but not anymore. So I have I'm using different kind So these are the credentials that you need. You need an application key and a private application ID and a private key. The way the authorization works in our platform is through JWTs. We support API key and secret, but that's just for all the APIs. For the newer one, we want to use JWTs. That's way more secure. Then I set a couple of different paths. So I'm going to try and do two demos. One is the traditional 2FA via SMS, and one is silent off. And you can see the difference in usability of those. So there's nothing special in here. Basically, if I look at the SMS, it's a lot of code. I'm using Axios, pushing some data. This is how easy it is to create a 2FA using SMS. So purely, you just send a message to that. I've just explained the name, right? We used to be called Nexmo. The URLs are still Nexmo in the platform. So all you have to do is just create a flow, SMS to that number. That triggers the whole 2FA, and then the whole thing works. Now, I have a tunnel actually happening here. So if you're trying it yourself, you can do it as well. Let me show you. So if you want to go to that URL, you can try it yourself. This one here. Right. So I'm going to do it from here, not from this one. Right, so you can see this is basically the demo. So you have two different ways of authenticating. So if I go to FA, I put my, you need to put the whole number with a country code. I could create some additional kind of niceties there, but that's called a E164 notation and kind of what's the industry works. So I'm going to put my number, and if I click start, then I should get text that says my Vonage code is 2326, and that should verify it, and you authorize your users, right? So that's the traditional way of doing it. You receive an SMS and you put it in. Now, for the second part, you do silent off. Now, the trick with that one, it doesn't work on the web, right? Remember, it needs a connection between the device and your network provider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it from here. Unfortunately, if I try to mirror this into my computer, it starts using the Wi-Fi from a computer, and it kind of breaks the whole setup, right? So for that to work, you'll have to trust me, and I'll do it like this. So we experienced the 2FA there via SMS. The connection is not that good. And this is why you don't do live demos, or people don't like doing that live demos. So I have a backup for that. The reception is patchy, and I use different networks, but it's still patchy. So let me start the slides. So here I've recorded literally my screen, and you can see what is happening. So the first scenario, click to FA, you put the number in, you click start, and then you get an SMS. We format it in a way that is easy for you to paste from the messages directly. So it's the standard. It was a new phone, so you got the pop-up. But that was traditional one. You have some user interaction. Now for the silent off, this is the magic. Oh, that was not supposed to happen. No. That video. Huh.
Yeah.
Right, but there's a lot of black there. Anyway, so sorry. I want to stop it here somewhere. So you click start. If you look at the URL here, it goes through different redirects because it goes to the mobile operator. It talks directly to them. And then it comes back and it says authorized. And literally, that's the whole experience for the user. They click a single button and they're authorized. All they have to put is their phone number. This is kind of where I think a lot of the user experience can go, and a lot of the apps will go, especially on the native. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this one. And this are the different APIs you're going to have as part of the network APIs. You have a lot of things that might look like privacy intrusion, but remember, this is the network operator. They know what the phone is, right? So a lot of people ask me, I did this at a conference in Eastern Europe, and a lot of people were kind of skeptical about age verification. So think of age verification as something that your network provider will have about you anyway. So for example, if you have children, you'll know how difficult it is to restrict mobile connection to the devices. And you'll know that a lot of the things that Apple and Google provide don't really work because there's that magic of 1 more minute, right? And they keep asking for more screen time. So with age verification, you can have it embedded in your mobile apps, and you can say, after a certain time or after a certain amount of usage, you just turn it off if this is the connection from there. We have all sorts of other things. At the moment, we're working on different of these APIs. SIM swap is an interesting one. So that's an API that tells you how, when was the last time the SIM for a number was changed. So moving to another network, getting another SIM, and that's a high indication of fraud, right? So a bank probably wouldn't allow you access if you swap your SIM in the last 2-3 days. That's a high vector of fraud. So you probably want additional clarity on that. The same thing happened with device swap. So this is taking a SIM from one phone and put it into another. And all this information, all the network operators will have, and they will like to expose it. And this is where we come in.
How granular is the information for SIM swap? So does it give me the history of the changes, or just the kind of?
No, that's where the privacy concern comes in. So you have intervals, and this is where the standard is being built at the moment. Usually, it depends. You have 1 to 7 days, 7 to 14, or it depends very much on the operators at the moment. But you don't want to go granular because that's where the privacy comes in. And you have in different geographies, you have different issues, right? So one of the APIs is the boost. I'm not sure if you can see there, but you can have network boosting. So you can ask for a slice of a network to be dedicated for you for a certain period of time. That needs to be done carefully because you have a network neutrality in EU, for example. So you can't boost someone's connection at the expense of someone else's. You need to have additional network capacity for that to happen. Yeah, all these different APIs, by the way, they're evolving really, really fast. So this is a screenshot I took today of a SIM swap, and you can see, even in the last month, there are lots of different changes, a lot of different contributions. And all those contributions are from people working either in the mobile operators, they're working in providers like us, like in aggregators, or they work as part of deployments for certain networks. Does that all make sense? Okay, cool. That's it for me then. Thank you.
Do we have any questions?
Maybe it was in the panel that you quickly showed before, but are you able to detect in advance and with reasonable amount of safety if we can do the silent authentication or not? So in case that if you were to run it
Again, and they will say, oh, you're on a laptop, I will only show the other button, the only for SMS, or conversely, you will see something a bit more responsive. Is it reliable or at the moment or not?
So what we tend to do, because this is still a technology that's being rolled out in the industry, and we have mobile operators kind of coming on board, is we provide it as part of a workflow. So you can say, I want to try silent off, and if it's not available for that particular device, go to normal 2FA over SMS. We have other channels. So we have WhatsApp, for example. Some people prefer WhatsApp compared to SMS because it's cheaper, depending on the country, depending on the audience. It uses the same number as the destination, but you will be able to kind of have a flow going down.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Fundamentally, this authentication method should be much cheaper than SMS authentication.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. It's for mobile operators, it's a different revenue stream, and that's how it is positioned. So it doesn't use the SMS, it doesn't use that channel. It goes directly to them. It's a completely different pricing model, completely different kind of technology.
And the demo you provided should work in your laptop if you use Wi-Fi from your mobile phone as Wi-Fi hotspot.
Not really, because the way the network is, the connection is shared, it doesn't do it directly through particular IP. So what the mobile operator checks is if it's run on the device itself. This can potentially be scaled to work on the laptop by having a companion app that does kind of authentication inside the mobile device. It's a bit like how you do authentication in the CLIs, for example, when you install a CLI like AWS or Linode, for example. It takes you to a web session, does authentication, and then enables the authorization inside of it. It works the same way, kind of a bit in reverse.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's one more at the back.
Just over there.
Yeah, I think you asked it. I was curious about that. Thank you. Yeah, I was curious about the mobile operators. For them, it's extra work for them, and they're probably not happy. So I guess
it's not. That's the beauty about it. Those APIs are already there because they're built by companies like Ericsson that provides the infrastructure for the networks. And funny thing, they exist even in 4G. They're just not exposed. And some operators tried to sell them back in the day, but because you need to have coverage in order to actually use them for a particular product. You can't say, oh, if you're in UK and you under free, you can use this particular authentication, but if you're under EU, you can't. So what we're trying to do, and this is kind of a Kamara project, standardize across different things, and then have aggregators like us put stuff together. So this is very much like about 10 years ago when we started doing, or even more than that, when we started doing SMS. At the moment, we send SMS in every single country in the world, apart from the usual suspects. In order to do that for a single API, you need to have connection to every single operator, and sometimes for resellers and so on. The same thing happens here, but it's kind of a different structure.
And who pays for the service?
The app developer. So the same. So at the moment, for example, if you use 2FA under SMS, the app developer will pay that. The bank will pay that. That's the reason Twitter, or X, I should say, decided not to use SMS any longer because it was expensive for them. So they decided to drop it. So it's additional security, and sometimes it's a balance between, how much it will cost you to kind of mitigate security risks and pay for this sort of things.
Right, I think that's it from the time that we have.
Perfect,
do you want
thank
to announce the winner?
Yeah, let me find it.
If you could just wait for another minute, that would be perfect.
Okay. The winner of the raffle is Vladi. Thank you very much.
Vladi, do you mind? Yeah.
That's what's most important, right? She'll come here and take it maybe behind the banner.
You take it out.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Enjoy. My pleasure. Oh, careful.
Right, big round of applause for Paul.
Thank you very much, everyone.
That will be it. Big thank you for coming to our last event of the year. I'm going to do the usual thing and head off to a pub. The pub's name is Commercial Tavern. Like, it's literally a couple of minutes away. So if you're up for joining us, you can just wait for us in the hallway and we can all head out there together. One more big thank you to Foolproof for providing us the space for us to do the meetup, for Vonage for providing us for sponsoring food and drinks. Big thanks to Aris for organizing this whole thing, for actually making a lot in City Jazz conferences and